What if there were no Himalayas between India and China? Have you ever thought about how geography plays a role in international politics? Hello everyone,
I am Rahul Devsar.
I am Prasanna Naidu and you are listening to the Right News podcast. Geopolitics as a term has been trending a lot, especially after the India-China conflict, which is going on till now. And we don't know when it will be ending. So, what does this geopolitics mean? I mean, if you break it down to understand it literally, it will be geo and politics. So, geo means, I think, geography, and politics is very, like, it has many definitions. We can't stick to one, but politics means basically means power and distribution of power. So, power contains, like, there is various types of power, like there is tangible power and there is intangible power. Tangible means which we can measure, like in terms of military, air force, etc., etc. And an example of intangible power is soft power, which US has. Okay, so literally, if I understand, I think geopolitics means the distribution of this power, but who decides who is more powerful? Is it like who has more geographical area?
Not, not really. Actually, geopolitics, like you said, is related to geography and how geography determines the power. We can say in much more granular terms, it is like a matching or it's like a duel of powers, of variety of powers, economic power, social power, soft power, like various powers you enumerated. It's a comparable clash of powers and how geography determines how it can affect. Now, if you look at the size, it's not always the size, but it is the location that determines how much leverage you have in this sort of conflict or clash of powers that we have. And I can give you an example. If you control the Suez Canal, you can control almost 45 to 50% of world trade. Now, Suez Canal is a small portion which can be used as a leverage over entire global trade, or 50%, 45, 50% of global trade. So, a small place can give you a big leverage, but it should be at the right place. So this is one example of power. So in India's case, if you see, the Khyber Pass was the point where every invasion took place, and that is a pinch point. So it is critical place for India's geopolitics. Currently, it is in Pakistan, but that's the geopolitical problem.
Can we take the India-China example itself? So, as I said earlier, when I started, if there were no Himalayas between India and China, so
Yeah, I can say that. Okay. So just like Suez Canal, for India, the Himalayas are a big geopolitical advantage. And the Himalayas have one opening in them, which is the Khyber Pass, from where all our enemies have tried to come in for the past more than 2000 years. And apart from that opening, Himalaya is our guardian for India. And you would have learned this since in your second standard, third standard, or any geography textbook in India starts with the Himalayas from the northern border of India, and that gives us protection from the cold winds that come and blow into from the northern pole, and that's why Indian climate is suitable for better agriculture. So that is the economic benefit of Himalayas. But there is a big barrier for any power to come in, and no power can come in without overcoming the Himalayas. And even today, in the age of air force and missiles and space power, Himalayas continue to be a geopolitical advantage for India.
yeah, so basically, Himalayas have been from ancient times kind of protection for the territory which we have today, right? So because most of the part we are covered, like it's covered by water bodies like this Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, etc., and the Bay of Bengal. So, and on the north side, northeastern side mostly, the Himalayan range is there, and that's why we were not attacked most probably from that side. Whatever invasions which took place was from the northwestern side. So, considering this, if there would have been no Himalayan mountain range, then probably invasions would have been took place from all over the north, right? Like the Chinese or the Mongols did invasions, but I think I don't know much about the history. If you can add something like
Yes and no, and now you've opened a can of worms. Actually, to understand what is the impact of Himalayas, we need to understand the exact importance of geopolitics, like you introduced. And you know, I mean, Himalayas are just one aspect of it. In geopolitics, not just Himalayas, but the advantage that Himalayas give or deny in context of all other advantages that the other country has, that also play an important role. For example, if China was not basically where it is, or it did not have whatever it has on its eastern front, Himalayas may not have been a big deal for it. But because China has those islands like Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines on the eastern seaboard, that's why having Himalayas is a big hindrance for China. And it is a big advantage for us, but that's a separate issue. And then, so that's why it is very important to understand what is geopolitics and how geopolitics influences not just power in military terms, but also in economic terms, social terms, and the prosperity of any civilization.
by prosperity of any civilization, can you just explain more? Like, how does geopolitics impact that?
So basically, if you before if we want to understand geopolitics, what we need to understand is what is the goal of a society. Society wants to be prosperous, so that the people in that society have enough means. They have their own system of governance, whatever it is. In old times, it was kings. Now it is a democracy. In other countries, it's a communist country, whatever it is. They have a mechanism to rule this society, so that they can become rich, they can get better lifestyle. Now that lifestyle, whether they are able to achieve it or not, is not just determined by them, but also by what others are doing,
Other countries are doing.
what other countries are doing. And that is when how this society interacts with other countries matter, and how other countries are able to extract more resources from this society, or they are able to shower this society with more wealth. That is decided by geopolitics.
Yeah. For example, what relations China and Pakistan have also has an effect with our relations with Pakistan.
Exactly. So it's not just so basically, if you look at geopolitics, it is like a desires of a society and the limits that geography places on how it is able to achieve that. So in some cases, I think you have also read about the strategy bridge. Let me explain that. Okay.
Huh.
So what actually it means is that, let's say, each society, each country in modern context has its own desires. Okay, it is political desire, it is economic desire, it is basically desire to lead a better life and improve its social standing. Now to that end, this country needs to trade with other countries. It is at risk of being attacked from other countries, and whether it is able to connect with other countries very easily, or it's very difficult for it to connect with other countries. That is the challenge that this country faces. Now this end, this is the end goal of every country, and it has means, like it has the means are basically how it organizes its economy, how it organizes its businesses, how it enforces its political internal polity, how much technology it uses, and all these sorts of things are its resources, it's the means, and these means have to be deployed in certain way. Okay, now for example, New Zealand is far away from everywhere in the world. So New Zealand is all dependent on maritime, sea infrastructure, shipping infrastructure. If there were no ships, there would have been no New Zealand. So that is so means New Zealand today has the means, but what tactics it uses, where it aligns. Does it align with Australia? Does it align with India? Does it align with China? Does it align in through navy? Does it
Yeah.
align through
How
land?
does it align? How does it align?
How does it align? So these are all tactics. These are the ways you use the means that you have and interact with others. Now, suppose China and United States, they have, there was a time when United States had attacked Canada. Okay. But today, they are very good neighbors. In fact, many Americans call Canada America, a better America. Okay. It's that much, it's their friendly, border policies, almost open movement between Canadian citizens and American citizens. So it has its own advantages. But at one stage, America had attacked Canada to claim the land that Canada had. So now they are friendly, and that has created a land tactic. You can say, they have used their land connections to enhance their, welfare, which is, their ends. Ends is to become a better and improved country, wealthier country. And they're able to enhance that because they have good land relations with America. So this is basically the tactics of it. But when we come to India versus China, you have to look at China's geography. Now, China is geographically a unique place. If you look at China, on the northern side, China has got desert, which is the Mongolian desert, which is actual desert. And on the western side, it is the Siberian, almost close to the Siberian desert. So it is very cold and it's almost barren. On the southern side, it has got Himalayas and the Tibetan plateau, and then all the mountainous region. It is almost inhabitable. On the eastern side, it has got a very fertile area where actually the entire Chinese civilization was based. However, if you look at the land mass of China, it is fine. But if you move out of the land mass and into the Pacific, you will find that outside the Chinese mainland, there is a chain of islands. Okay, there is Japan, there is Taiwan, there is Philippines, and all of these are actually not China's very good friends, we can say. So China has a dispute with all of them. So in any potential conflict, the Chinese army is, it can only accumulate on the eastern front. The northern front is very difficult. There is nothing to move in northern front. On the southwest, the Himalayas are there, so it has to go across the Himalayas, which is a very difficult job in itself, and we'll come to later about how they are trying to improve that. So army cannot move. Air Force has been another issue, but Navy also cannot move because Navy can be blocked by Japan, Taiwan, and Philippines, and there are American bases around. So it is easy to block China's entry into the Pacific. So if China cannot go into the Pacific, can it go south towards Australia? And as it goes south, you find that it enters into the Malacca Strait where it is Singapore. Again, there are American bases where China cannot move. Okay.
Yeah, and again, the Malacca Strait is also too narrow. I think
It's too narrow.
less than 100 kilometers.
Less than 40 kilometers, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It is narrow and it is long. And at one end, we have the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So from Andaman Nicobar, you can just shout out to Singapore and the whole Malacca Strait can be blocked. Then you come below in the Indonesian waters. There again, it's very difficult to maneuver because there are so many small islands and there are many American bases, international waters, Indonesian waters. So it's very difficult for China to access the Pacific in a problematic scenario. It is very difficult for China to access any part of the West, that is the European side, through the Himalayan and the Tajikistan and all that area. So China is sort of caught. Okay. Now these points are also naval choke points, but they are also trade choke points. So even if you don't want to fight, you can just stop all the trade by guarding all these islands, and none of them are their friends, which is, you can say, surprising. Because if you had such a problem, then you would want friends who are guarding those islands. But that's where you have tactics. So your tactics have been such that none of them are your friends. So that is your bad tactics. But now the situation is like that. Okay, you can't go out in the Pacific, you can't go out in the Indian Ocean without being watched, and you can't go out into Europe through land. So what to do? So you're stuck, and that is China's dilemma. And India, on the other hand, if you look at India's position, India is a uniquely blessed position. So on the north we have Himalayas, which prevent any sort of attack, or they make any sort of attack really difficult. On the south we have three sides, we are surrounded by seas, and on one side is Pakistan, which is our most vulnerable border. So if even in that part of the border, most of it is desert, so that is also very difficult to cross. But it is nevertheless easier than Himalayas. But if you come to the naval side, on the ocean side, India has access to two very, very crucial points in the global trade routes. One is the Suez Canal, which is very close to us on one side, that is towards the Arabian Sea into the Red Sea, and we go into Suez Canal. On the other side, we go into Malacca Strait, where, as I mentioned, Andaman Nicobar Islands sit at the gate of Malacca Strait. Between these two straits, which is the Malacca Strait and the Suez Canal, they contribute to about 70% of the world trade. So if India decides to choke these 2 points, it can block 70% or 75% of the world trade. These two choke points are very, very important, and India has access to both, which is a unique condition. No other country has access to both. Now, America realized this, and America created a naval base in the Indian Ocean in Diego Garcia. And America has naval bases all across, because America knew this is going to be a problem after World War II. So they have naval bases all across the world. But in Indian Ocean, the base is Diego Garcia, and we are friendly with Americans. So between us and Americans, we can really choke everything, and we can police almost every dollar of trade in the world, and that is the most significant geopolitical advantage.
Okay. You have touched upon various tactics related to land, sea, but are there other tactics too, like cyber and air? And how can countries use that?
So that's a very, very important question in the modern times, because in the old times, geography was more important because there was no air. Okay, after the invention of the aircraft, this geography, that's why in fact we have forts in India. You must have seen many, many forts. The advantage of this fort is because you cannot come and attack from the air. The minute you start attacking from the air, these forts have no meaning. Okay, so that's why Shivaji built lots of forts. That's why even all across the country you find kings and busy building forts. Even in Chanakya, he says ki forts are important.
That is a part of the Saptanga theory.
Yes, and that is because there was no access to aerial warfare. The minute aerial warfare came, forts became, the importance of forts really went away. So there is no fort. Even that Great Wall of China, which was very important in pre-air warfare times, is of no use now. Now it can be easily overcome by using a drone also. So it's of no use. That is the significance of air power. So in this modern time, I mean, I'm not even talking to modern time, but in around World War II, forts have lost their significance. Now what is important is air power. But air power also has its own limitations. You can't really fly vast amount of bombs or ammunition for long distances. So all these aircraft have limitations, and they can be shot down. So there's a lot of risk. So in any case, air power does have limitations, because even the attacker is not on stable ground. so he can be shot down, and you can also use your own air power against the attacker. So air power has its limitation based on different things. Like in China, and currently this is very important. Where is your air base matters a lot in air power. So if in India all the air bases are in the plains or Delhi, Ambala, in the UP Gangetic plain. So they are at sea level. So at sea level, because the air pressure is high, the aircraft can take off at a full load. So if aircraft, let's say whatever aircraft you say, Boeing, the airplanes that we fly, Boeing 737, Boeing 747, 777, it has a capacity of 500 passengers. Then it can take up 500 passengers, full load of cargo, and easily take off in the airfields that we have. But if you want to fly a plane like Boeing 777 or some of these planes which have, like, let's assume 500 people capacity, and try to take off from a base in Tibet, you can't do that because the amount of air is less, amount of oxygen in the air is less. The engine cannot breathe that much. There you will only use the aircraft at half capacity, or maybe, very less cargo or something like that. You will balance it more finely, and you will make sure that you have enough room to gather that thrust to take off from such a high altitude airfield. So even though China has lots of airfields, they are all at high altitudes. So their takeoff, aircraft from those fields, they cannot carry the full weapon load, and they cannot expect to go the full range. Like, let's say, suppose a fighter aircraft goes 3,000 kilometers. If that same fighter aircraft takes off from this 7,000 or 9,000 feet elevation, it will not be able to go 3,500 kilometers, whatever its range is. It will only go 1,500 or 1,800 kilometers, maybe 2,000. Then it will have to carry less bombs. So it cannot fight as much as an aircraft which takes off from, let's say, Indian Air Base. So all these are factors in air defenses. Now,
this is an interesting point because when we, like, usually people who know little bit of geopolitics, they usually discuss that, okay, the mountain range is here, there is a river here, there is a canal over here, that's why these are the problems and all. But what type of area it is, even that matters. Like you said, there is a plain and there is a plateau. Then it is difficult for air warfare. So why it is difficult? So the proportion of oxygen is less here, there is more. So that helps in taking off the plane and all. So these things also affect the geopolitical advantages and disadvantages, right?
Yes, it affects a lot. For example, let's say, and again, like, for example, what you have done. So that's why, when you were discussing that means, tactics, and ends. So you have the means, whatever means you have, and then what your tactics you have done. So, for example, in China, what they've done, they have built a huge dam, okay, which is the Three Gorges Dam. Now, this dam is fantastic. It's, no problem about that. But the problem is that, if there is a war and India wants to attack this dam, then this dam, a successful attack on this dam will cause far more damage. Okay. So this is like, asymmetric impact. So, like, if India wastes 10 aircraft in attacking this one dam, and one aircraft is successful, this one aircraft will create a problem for millions of people, hundreds of millions even, maybe, because that dam is such a big dam and it is being created by China. So it is the way it's your tactics also affect. So you have created a vulnerable spot. Now you have to guard it with your life. If by chance one missile, BrahMos missile, just goes and rams into this, it's a 100 million lives lost. So these kinds of things are also what you are doing, how much vulnerable you are. A part of that responsibility is also yours to see that you have, like, India has a problem in the Sikkim chicken neck, it is called. It's a very narrow strip of land. So if there is some untoward incident, you need to guard it very, very properly. You have to be very alert there. It is a geographic vulnerability. So then the next part is the cyber. Okay. So cyber is another interesting part, because cyber, you can, now people in business, they say that geography doesn't matter, end of geography, because you can be anywhere, work from home, work from anywhere, but that doesn't work all the time. The main thing is you need to have access to, cyber, and that access can be easily sort of controlled, because the access, global access to the internet is heavily dependent on submarine cables. Now these submarine cables are the sort of weak point. If you cut there is a submarine cable which runs from India to Singapore. You cut that, you will have a problem that there will be, all the networks will be down in India, everything will be slow. You will be connected, no doubt, but systems won't run as well as they're supposed to.
No,
So,
this I had read somewhere, like there was a country somewhere in Africa where for 2 days there was no internet access because some submarine cable was damaged.
exactly.
So these things may also happen. Fortunately, India is not dependent on one or two cables. I think it has more than like five or more than 10 cables. So even if one two cables get damaged, we can survive uh, based on other cables.
No, true, it is like that. But like when we realize cyber connectivity, we don't realize that cyber is possible because of physical connectivity. So without physical connectivity, there is no cyber connectivity. So
Hmm.
physical wires have to be there so that this cyber connectivity is available to you. So satellite connectivity is possible, but satellite connectivity has not been able to deliver that much bandwidth which the submarine cables have. So you will have some network, but the problem is that you're still dependent on your geographical connectivity. So the point is that geography still is relevant. It is less relevant since, the relevance has changed a little because of air warfare and developments in missiles and long range missiles, but you know it is still relevant.
Right. So yeah, we have talked about air and cyber, but what about space? Can the countries use that also and make some change in geopolitics?
Uh, the space warfare is a new field, and as of now, space is being used for collecting information. So basically, you send up a lot of satellites, and these satellites basically watch certain areas across the world, and they give you some information advantage. Now, that can be very small, like how many cars are in the parking of the mall, that can be monitored, or how many tanks are aligned at the border, that can be monitored. So there are variety of satellites doing variety of monitoring of variety of, you can say, military assets, economic assets, political assets. You can even track if you have that much information through relatable data, that where the person is moving. So in one instance, for example, I will tell you that they were trying to find out from where is the hacking taking place. America wanted to find out somewhere in China. They knew that the hacking is taking place in from China, but where, which building are they sitting? What are they doing? That was not, they couldn't find it, and they were tracking all the people who were potentially hackers. So they wanted to know which building, and they couldn't pinpoint. So what happened was they were tracking credit card usage of this one person who always, the hacking always started like 5 minutes after he swiped at a Starbucks or whatever place. So they picked up this has to be within 5 minutes of this Starbucks, and that's how they pinpointed. Now that you can imagine, satellites were watching, the hackers were watching, American hackers were tracking him. The information was being monitored and encrypted, decrypted, and his credit card transaction was being monitored real time, and then they reached at this stage. So that is like a combined use of satellite, cyber, technology, and
Yeah.
so
So
you can imagine you've used the means, which is you're putting, you're powerful, you put satellite there,
technology. Yeah.
you
Hmm.
have hackers, that is means, and then tactics. All you have used to find out who is hacking, who is creating the cyber attack on America.
That is a very good example which supports that privacy is a myth. Okay. So these are the tactics which we usually use, which countries usually use, as we said, the sea, land, cyber, space, and air. And with these tactics, they channelize their means like military, intelligence, using technology, diplomacy, economic factors to get the ends, which is their political or policy based objective, which
Right.
each country has a different objective, or some countries may have the same objective against some other countries, and that's where all the geopolitics plays around, and this cloud of geopolitics keeps on moving and changing. Okay. So how do you see India China's geopolitics in the current scenario?
So, if you see, to understand geopolitical, the battle which has been going on between India and China, you have to look at the holistic picture. So, what China is doing in one particular area in Ladakh or in Arunachal is just one part of it. But just like we explained, China doesn't have access to the Pacific Ocean. China doesn't have access to Indian Ocean because India is sitting there. So China needs access to some form, some route where it can trade effectively. So China created this policy called string of pearls. A string of pearls is nothing but a series of ports where Chinese submarines and Chinese navy can sit, and Chinese navy will be able to control movement of Chinese trade ships and protect them because they are sitting in these ports. So these are the string of pearls. These are the pearls will be the ports. Now that was sort of a, like we were saying, if you have trouble, if your ships have trouble going out, you will escort them. Correct. You will have an armed escort. So this armed escort, instead of moving this armed escort every time from China and following them, you will have these various ports where you can provide arm escort. So when you come into Singapore, they will be handed over to a port in Burma. So this armed escort of Burma will take this ship along to port in Bangladesh. Then the Bangladeshi Chinese the ship which is stationed in Bangladesh will hand over to, it will take it around Indian Peninsula, and then some African port, another Chinese ship from African port will protect it, and it will take it through the Suez Canal and into that. That is the plan. But still, it is their ships are also in the Indian waters. Indian Navy is not a pushover. So again, that is a risk. It is a conflict. So they said that the best way is to have a land access to Europe. Now, how will the land access come? So they developed this plan called BRI, which is Belt and Road Initiative, which is the New Silk Road Initiative. So this creates the land access into Europe. So a product or let's say a laptop or a mobile phone which is made in Shanghai can travel on railways, this trains, goods trains across the Chinese land and get transferred into maybe trucks or something and move through these mountain passes and then move into another trains of European trains and then move to Europe, and then once you're in Europe you're free. So because that whole thing is connected, so you can go across. Now there is another point which I will come back to, but there was another way to connect China, Chinese requirements, because China also needs oil, and oil is in Middle East. Okay, now to come from the Himalayan north of Tajikistan and all that, that area into Middle East is a little problematic because you have to cross Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, or those areas and then enter. So instead of that, they thought that they will have a deal with Pakistan and they will enter the Gwadar port, and which is right at the entry point of the strait which goes to Iran and Saudi Arabia. Both are on one side of that. So that is the reason for Gwadar port. Now across Gwadar, there is a Chabar port,
which is in Iran.
which is in Iran and which was part of actually Oman. Okay, so very old time when Oman gave it to Iran, and then Iran, there is nothing there. Okay, it's just the one port. It's a very small port. So Iran said, "Ki India is our friend. We will give it to India." So India has got access to Chabar port, which is next to Gwadar. Okay, again it's a problem.
And which is near to the entrance to that.
Entrance to that nearer, it is still nearer. So another problem, if you go on this side, the other side of that, on the bottom side, you will find that Oman is being India's close friend. So Sultan of Oman, who has been India's friend for a long time, he has given us access to many of these ports. You can always come. So India has access to those ports also. So this is like, there are many bases where India can operate out of and China can operate out of. But this, once the idea of the Chinese is ki now we will only fight with Gwadar and that part, and then once the ship comes to Gwadar, we will put it on pipelines or trucks, and then from Gwadar we'll take it straight through Pak occupied Kashmir, which is the China Pakistan Economic Corridor, the CPEC, and then go into China. So nobody can block our oil. Okay, which is a big problem for any country to fight war, because we have warships. Warships run on oil. Very few run on nuclear. But most of them run on oil. So you don't get oil. You have like 10,000 warships, but they are all in the dock because there is no oil. Then you are gone. Okay. You have planes. They also need oil. The planes don't run on nuclear. So that is also gone. So everything depends on oil. So this CPEC is very critical. Okay. Now CPEC goes through Pakistan occupied Kashmir, because there is no connection between Pakistan and China. There is only connection between India and China as per the map. India touches Afghanistan. So Pakistan is landlocked. On one side is Afghanistan, below Afghanistan is part of Iran, on the other side is India, and then there is their sea. So Pakistan doesn't touch China. So for China to have land access to oil, controlling POK is critical. In their mind, POK was always free for China. Okay, so that they had no problem. But when Balakot happened, India just flew across POK and attacked the interior positions. They now say this has become a big problem, because India can anytime bomb this CPEC and cut it off. So there is of no use. Okay, having the road, oil traveling from Gwadar and coming up to Peshawar and stopping there is of no value to China. Okay, and oil makes a very good explosive substance. So it's even worse. Okay, so this will become big problem. So now what to do? So that's why they are creating interference in Ladakh, because they don't want us to interfere in POK. The minute POK comes to India, the plan fails. Okay, so there is no access for China into the oil without POK, because on the other side is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is India's friend. Now you can imagine that Pakistan has two neighbors, both are friends. Afghanistan is India's friend.
Iran is India's friend.
Tajikistan is friend. So everyone is friend except Pakistan. And everyone is saying that Pakistan is the problem. And now America is realizing that. America doesn't have access to Afghanistan, because they have troops in Afghanistan. So India said, we will use the Chabar port and supply to your troops. So then they realized, how can India supply from Iran, because Iran is America's enemy, and all this complicated stuff is going on. So China is now really in a catch-22, because they have no land access to oil. So they have to go through Russia now. Now if you go across and if you check the map, okay, and see where the Russian side goes through. If you see, let me tell you this funny thing which is very relevant for today. After Tajikistan and Turkestan, there is a whole big problem. Iran, Afghanistan, that whole area is a problem. Then you get to Caspian Sea. Okay. After Caspian Sea, still you are not in Europe. You are in Middle East only. Okay, you have not reached Europe because you have to reach Europe, which is basically you have to reach Turkey. Now, if you cross the Caspian Sea, then you reach Azerbaijan and Armenia, where the current war is going on. Now, you can imagine what is going on there has got geopolitical implications back here in China. Because even though you might reach Uzbekistan, you may reach the Caspian Sea, but if there is a problem in Armenia and Azerbaijan, you still can't reach because you have to cross them and reach Turkey. And from
Hmm.
Turkey, you have to again cross Istanbul Strait and then go into Europe. So there is a long, long way from China to these places. And that is the problem. So China created this string of pearls. India countered with its own, whatever you can call it, pearls or whatever you can call them. But India has a base. I have a map which I have shared with you yesterday, I think, where bases of India and bases of China. So those are the bases, and India also is friends with America, who has their own bases. So it's very difficult to move through the sea route. Like I told you, POK, if you forget POK, it's very difficult to move through land route. Now you are blocked. So now that's why they are creating problems on the Taiwan side. At least if we get access to that side, we can at least get out from there. So
Yeah,
this
and maybe that's why this Galwan thing happened. Like they just want to make sure that our resources are consumed more in the northern part, so that we don't become a naval power and don't block them in the sea region.
exactly. So now we are talking about the using another means. Now China has another means, which is the economic means. China is economically bigger than India.
Hmm.
So China has more resources. India has limited resources. So what can we do? So China has engaged India in this string of pearls and all this is one. But it has engaged India through Pakistan. Pakistan is creating a problem. So you have some Indian resources tied up in the Pakistan side. Now China has opened to this in the Ladakh side. It is interfering in the Sikkim side last year, where they were, interfering in Bhutan's
Doklam.
Doklam Plateau, and they are creating multiple geographical fronts where resources will be consumed. Now, India is focused, or India has to focus its resources on all these border areas because India has a huge border, okay, with China. So, all these areas we have to focus our efforts, and hopefully we will not focus enough on navy, we will not focus enough on other assets and where they can go, but the main pinch point is POK. So long as we don't interfere in POK, they will be fine. So they don't want us to interfere in POK, so they are engaging us in multiple situations in multiple locations across the Chinese border. So our focus goes to Chinese border, Pakistan border remains, POK remains in safe zone. That is their advantage. Now also they are using economic resources by creating many more roads, many more camps. India has to match it now. So it's a game of one-upmanship. So how many people they can put? They can put trucks, they can put roads. We have to put, so many roads, tanks. Where will we get that? So we'll have to also make those roads, tunnels, bridges. Again, the more bridges, more tunnels means more vulnerable points in the supply chain. So all this becomes it's a like a game theory for every mini decision is like a game theory. You have only 10 rupees, you have 5,000 rupees of work to do to match China. And what China is going to do, China is not going to fight with people. If you ask me, China will use drones. If you take one drone and put a explosive on that drone and just land the drone on Indian positions, India will have it is very difficult to shoot down a drone. I mean, we'll have much more because a missile costs like a million. Missile is costly. It will cost some few crores. A drone is costing 10,000 rupees. So China can manufacture drones, such kind of drones, the smaller ones, in millions because that is their strength.
Hmm.
So will you spend one, crore rupees, crores worth missile to shoot down a drone which is 10,000 rupees? No. So which means that 10,000 rupee drone will be a big problem for you. So this is how you use economic resources, your manufacturing power. Your means is the manufacturing power that you have, and you're using that to create advantage for your own, problem. Basically your own challenges. India can also use those drones. Nothing stopping India from doing that. But
the quantity will differ. The
quantity
amount
will
of
differ. Yes. So in 1962, what happened was, for every 10 soldiers of India had posted, they posted 500 soldiers. Now, how much ever your soldiers are good, they were not equipped. So they have to fight 500 soldiers. It's a big, problem to fight these battles. For 10 soldiers to hold up against 500 soldiers. 10 can hold up against 50 because you are at you hold a strategic point or something like that. But so that they overwhelmed us with people. Today they can't use people because their people are rich. They don't want to die. So today they will use drones because drones are cheaper, and they will probably overwhelm us with the drones, and we will not have as many drones to counter them. So this is the challenge in in the modern India-Pakistan conflict.
India-China conflict.
India-China conflict.
Okay, now we have understood what difference does it make in the geopolitics regarding India with the decisions made by countries which are not even near to India, right? Like Taiwan, Hong Kong, or say Azerbaijan and Armenia, as you have pointed out with that example. So I think that's it for this episode. We have covered a lot of things, like a lot of new things our listeners may have come to know about regarding geopolitics, the strategy different countries use, the tactics they use, like the cyberspace, etc., and the means to achieve their ends, their political objectives. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you like this conversation and want to listen more, make sure that you follow us here to get notified about the latest episode. Thank you.
Thank you.